Hey everybody, it's Steve here, Mr. Chuffy84. I hope you're all keeping well and keeping safe. I hope you had a good Easter, albeit a very strange and different one. But I hope you've all been able to find things to do at home, in your gardens, being able to get out in the fresh air and enjoy the sunshine for a short walk or whatever. Just hope you're all keeping well. Today I'm going to do another movie review for you. And for this movie, I'm marking an anniversary today because today is the 108th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic, which is at I think it was 2:20 a.m. on the 15th of April 1912. And here we are 108 years later. So which movie am I going to do today? Well, you know what I'm going to do because of the title of the review. So no, it's not the big movies that portray the voyage and the sinking of the Titanic. So not the James Cameron Titanic from 1997 or the movie called A Night to Remember from the 1940s. Today I'm going to be looking at Raise the Titanic. The Titanic itself is the only non-fictional thing about the movie, and the rest is fictional, based on the novel by Clive Cussler, and I do have a copy of that novel, which I've not been able to. I haven't read all of it yet. I've read the first part of it, but just finding the time to actually. And I know you're thinking, Steve, lockdown. You should have plenty of time to do some reading. Yes, I know that, but I've been doing other things too. So there we go. So there's the novel, written in 1976, and then the movie came out 4 years later in 1980. Hope you can see that. Starring Richard Jordan as Dirt Pitt. Dirt Pitt is the hero, the action hero in Clive Cussler's novels. He's been in the other novels with Dirt Pitt as well, and Raise the Titanic is one of them. You have Jason Robards here as Admiral Sandecker, Anne Archer, who has a minor role as the love interest. She is seeing a character called Dr. Seagrim, played by David Selby, who she's in love with. But Dirt Pitt was also one of her flings as well. So there's an awkward little love triangle going on in this film, which is not explored very much, which is just as well. And then Alec Guinness, the wonderful Alec Guinness, who plays one of the survivors of the disaster. We'll talk about that in more detail. Now, the movie is infamous because at the time when it was released in 1980, it not only received negative reviews, it was also the biggest box office flop of all time. At a budget of $40 million, and it only raked in $7 million. So a budget of $40 million, and at the box office, only $7 million. So a loss of $33 million. Lou Grade, who financed the film with ITC, famously said, very famously said, it would have been cheaper to lower the Atlantic. Wonderful quote. So for me, after seeing this film, and I've seen this film a few times now over the years, is it really as bad as they say it is? Yes and no. There are some redeeming things about this movie. It is far from a perfect movie. It has a number of flaws. It's technically, there are some good things about it, but as far as filmmaking is concerned, it's quite slapdash. It's not that well done. But there are some redeeming features, which I'll come on to. Let's just very quickly talk about anyone else in this movie who I haven't mentioned. No, I don't think so. I think that's everybody. Jason Robards, Richard Jordan, David Selby, Anne Archer, and Alec Guinness. Let's get the negatives out the way, shall we? And there are a number. Firstly, the directing. A guy called Jerry Jameson directed this movie. Not a big name in filmmaking. He came in to replace the original director, a guy called Stanley Kramer, who made quite a few good movies in his time. He wants to direct this movie. He liked the novel. He liked the subject matter. All going well, but the models, the Titanic models, the different size models that they were making, they were costing an enormous amount of money. And the mothership, if you were, the big model, the huge model, which is used for the raising sequence and as it surfaces, was costing. It was much bigger than anyone had ever anticipated, and it was costing a lot of money. And Stanley Kramer was being told, "Well, you've got to cut this out. You've got to cut that out. We need to keep it to budget." And there was just no way he could do it. He was having problems with the producers as well. So just 2 days into shooting, Stanley Kramer stepped aside. So they had to find another director at short notice, and so they went with this guy called Jerry Jameson, who had, as I say, hadn't done any really big movies. The only the big film that he'd done, I think, was a film called Airport 77, which is one of the sequels to the Airport film franchise. It was okay, nothing special, but it was okay. It was competent. It was competently done. Yeah, it's fine. So he was hired. So in all fairness to him, and this is the only time I'm going to defend him here, he had very little time to prepare to direct this movie. However, and also he was working with the next minus point, which was a very bad script. The screenplay is terrible. It is absolutely terrible for this film. The novel is far more exciting. Apparently, I haven't read all the novel, but the novel is a lot more exciting than the movie. It's supposed to be an action-adventure film. Which I'll tell you about the story in a second, but it is terrible. The screenplay is terrible. There's some shocking dialogue, and Jerry Jameson was working with a bad script, but he could have done more as a director just to liven things up a bit. It's very pedestrian and it's very flat as well in its performances. The performances range from okay to very flat. And we're talking from everybody here, except from perhaps Alec Guinness, who has a couple of really lovely scenes. It's a very, very small part for Alec Guinness, but I'll let you see the movie to see it for yourselves. But the scenes that he's in are really nice. They're really quite moving and quite touching. Richard Jordan, David Selby have some good moments and they have some not so good moments. Jason Robards, I would say, is actually pretty good. Anne Archer's character is not very well written, it has to be said, and she has a terrible line in this film. Again, the screenplay. Oh my word. Terrible dialogue in some of this film, and Anne Archer is one of the worst lines, definitely, about she's going fishing with Dr. Seagram, David Selby's character, and she's saying, "I have problems with putting the wormy on the hooky." Oh my word. Oh, I just listen to that and I cringe every time. It's a horrible line. But there's some terrible dialogue in this film as well. And just the way it's structured as well. And also how it's edited as well. There is some shocking editing in this film as well. One case in point, about 10 minutes in, there's a scene between two Russian characters, and the way that one shot is cut into the next, and well, it's terrible. It's awful. You know, the way that it's done. It's some of the editing, as I say, is very slapdash and done with no care at all. So a real shame. So the editing is terrible in places. The directing is less than inspired. The screenplay is terrible, and and the performances, because of all of that, especially the screenplay and the direction, the performances are less than magnificent. But there are some redeeming things, which I'll come on to in just a second. I'll just talk very quickly about the story. If you haven't seen this movie, so what is this story about? Well, let me just give you a quick. Let me read the synopsis from the back of the DVD. A search by the American Special Services for a material vital to national security leads to the world's most infamous shipwreck. They believe the mighty, unsinkable ship was carrying a supply of a vital material, which we learn in the film and in the book is a mineral called byzanium, that could be used to make the United States impregnable to atomic attack. The wreck lies too deep for divers to reach, so the only solution is to raise it. But the Herculean project must be managed in absolute secrecy. This despite the extreme rigours of the climate the need to work with previously untested technology, and deadly interference from a rival nation, which I've already blown there because we know now, that it's the Russians. Adapted from Clive Cussler's international bestseller, Raise the Titanic is an exciting and chilling underwater race to salvage the Titanic and its vital cargo, 70 years after its tragic sinking. A memorable deep-sea adventure made 5 years before the actual discovery of the Titanic's location in 1985. And you've probably been thinking up to now, well, wait a minute, how could they raise the Titanic? It broke in half. It broke in two. Port side, starboard side sank separately. Yes, it did. But that wasn't proven, even though there were eyewitnesses, of course, from the actual event. It wasn't proven until they actually found the wreckage 5 years after this movie was made, and about nearly 10 years after the novel was written. So Clive Cussler in the novel treated the Titanic as one whole, that it was still intact. So in order to get this fictional Byzanium, which is in the cargo hold in the Titanic, they have to lift the whole vessel up in order to get to this mineral. So if you watch the film thinking, no, this is ridiculous, but you need to remember that it wasn't discovered until after the film was made. So that's that. So it is to say. It says it's exciting. The novel is exciting. The film, no. No. But please don't let that put you off from not seeing it. It is worth a watch for a couple of reasons. It's not exciting. As I say, it's pedestrian. It is flat in its pacing as well. But as I say, there are some good things about this movie. The exploration sequences where they search for the Titanic, even though they're quite slow, is quite entertaining, and there's some good stuff in there. There's some good scenes in there. The scene between Richard Jordan and Alec Guinness is really nice. Set in Cornwall. Check that out. That's really nice. And then you come to the models. Now, the models in this movie are wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. They made different versions of the Titanic for the film. The big one, the massive one, they had to build an enormous tank in Malta. The big model of the Titanic that they made for this movie, which cost a lot of money to make, the model itself, the big model itself, cost $7 million to make. And that's why the film went over budget. It was so big that they couldn't use any of the water tanks in other studios. They had to build a large tank, in Malta, and in order to do the raising sequences. And that's what they did. And it is beautiful. It's a beautiful model. And it is the most exciting thing about the film is when they get the charges on the seabed. They have to have explosives which sounds ridiculous, I know, but they have to have explosive charges around the area of the Titanic on the seabed in order to help it lift. There are other things that help make the Titanic buoyant, which I won't go into now. That's too boring, but the explosive charges, one by one, help to get the Titanic moving off the seabed, and then it lifts and lifts and lifts. And then it bursts out and onto the surface. It takes a long time for all of that to happen, for it to get off the seabed, for it to raise, and then for it to come out and onto the surface, to burst out the water and land on the surface. It takes forever. It's long, it's lengthy, it's as slow as anything. They do that whole raising sequence, so it bursts out the water in super slow motion. And you think, oh my goodness, this is going on for too long, this is so slow, get on with it. But why do they do that? Well, the only theory that I have is because the money was right there on screen, and the filmmakers wanted to make the most of all that money that they'd spent on this model. So they wanted as much time on this model as possible. It does look lovely. They didn't want it over, and they didn't want the racing sequence, the moment that everybody had been waiting for. They didn't want it over and done with within 20 seconds. They wanted to make it into 2 minutes, 3 minutes. That's why it takes so long. But it is worth it. It is worth it. It is a great sequence to watch, and it does show off the detail of the model in that sort of super slow motion. So you do get quite a lot out of it, and it's shot at different camera angles. You see the thing coming out of the water from different angles as well. There's some nice impressive camera angles there. It's a great sequence. It is the most exciting sequence of the whole film. There's no doubt about it. And that comes at about an hour and 10 minutes in. The rest of the movie is, as I say, is not wonderful, to say the least. But that is good. The models are great. The racing sequence is great. And another very key feature of this film is the score, written by the one and only Mr. John Barry of James Bond fame, of course. Wrote all of the classic James Bond scores. As well as Oscar-winning films that he wrote for, such as Born Free, Dances with Wolves, The Lion in Winter. He wrote so many wonderful scores to wonderful films, plus wonderful scores to duds or stinkers like this. So much so that actually fans and critics alike say that they believe that his score to Race to the Titanic is the best, one of his very, very best scores. John Barry himself completely disregarded the whole project because of the failure of the film, he didn't think much of his own score for it, didn't think anything of the film. But fans and critics still regard this as one of his very, very best scores, alongside all of his other great scores, because it is that good. It is seriously good. There are 3 wonderful themes that he wrote for this movie. The first, which is featured in the movie, which is over the opening sequence, which is a photo montage of actual photographs from 1912 of the Titanic in port, ready to go to dock from Southampton to go from Southampton to New York. And the passengers on the Titanic as well. This big photo montage, which is really nice, and it replaced an original opening sequence, which I'll come to in a minute. But that theme is glorious. It's the Titanic theme in all its glory. It's beautiful. The second major theme for this film, which is featured throughout the film, is in the minor key. Is a more somber theme, and that's for when you see the Titanic on the seabed, the wreck of the Titanic on the seabed, and the exploration scenes where the submersibles search for it, etc., etc. That's a wonderful theme. And another theme is in one of the scenes, which involves Alec Guinness, which is like reflecting on the Titanic, looking back on it, which is a beautiful piano piece and with a lovely saxophone part as well. That's a glorious theme, and the rest of the score is beautiful. It is well worth checking out. I have to say, I heard the score first before I saw the movie, and I'm glad that I did, because it was just good to know the score well before seeing the movie. Well worth listening to. Even if you want to see the movie, great. If you don't want to bother with the movie, that's fine as well. But one thing you should do, if you love your film music, please check out John Barry's score for Race to the Titanic. It is a bit repetitive in places, but it doesn't matter. It is wonderful. So the opening sequence, as we're saying, photo montage, actual photographs from 1912 of the Titanic before it set sail. Now, originally, that was not going to be the opening sequence. They were going to actually do the sinking of the Titanic using one of the big models as the opening sequence. and they filmed it. They did actually film it, and and there's proof of that because on the DVD, the special features of the DVD and the Blu-ray as well, in the photo stills, there are production photographs. There's an on-set photographer who took some photos of the crew filming that original opening sequence of the sinking of the Titanic, colliding with the iceberg and sinking. Just how much detail there was in the actual scene, I don't know. And I don't know how much other deleted footage there is from the movie, but that is the most significant thing. It does exist. The actual, I don't know why it didn't make the grade in the end. Whether they just looked at the scene and they just thought that it just didn't work to start the film for whatever reason. Maybe they looked at it and just thought it wasn't good enough. I don't know. I don't know why it didn't make it. I personally would love to see it. I would love to see that original sequence to see how it would have how it looked and how it would play out in the rest of the movie. But as I say, apparently the footage still exists. A private collector has got it somewhere. Where I don't know, and that person I don't think is going to let anybody see it. You know, so it's fair dues. It's his property now, his or her property. I have no idea who it is. But I'm hoping that one day in years to come, we will get to see it in some way. But in the meantime, the still photographs on the DVD give you a little idea of what the opening scene, which was going to be the sinking sequence, was going to look like. But I hope that one day we'll be able to see the actual film, depending on what condition it's in now, 40 years on. Because thinking about it, yeah, it's 40 years old now, Raise the Titanic, 40 years old. So what condition that film, that original sequence is in now, we don't know. And whether we'll ever see it, I hope that we do. Okay, so that, ladies and gentlemen, is Raise the Titanic from 1980. Quite a lot to get through there. I don't think I've missed anything out there. I think we've talked about everything there. The direction, the performances, the screenplay, all of which are below par. But the redeeming features are the model work, most definitely. The raising sequence itself, which is quite exciting, which is quite entertaining. And the score, which is absolutely beautiful. So there we go. So that's it. That is Raise the Titanic. If you haven't seen it, give it a try and see what you think. Yes, it's nothing like the James Cameron movie and Night to Remember and any other of the Titanic movies, but worth a go. Okay, folks, that's it then for now. I'll be back very, very soon with another review. In the meantime, just take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again soon. Okay, take care for now. Bye bye.